Can I also have a clicker? Yay. Clickers. Let's see if it works. Thanks everyone for joining. I do appreciate it. I'm not going to make too many comments about the weather. We all know it's bad weather, and I moved to the sun. I will explain it in a little bit, but I'm happy to be back in the Netherlands. We're going to speak about senior hiring today in the connotation of the executive space. For a while, industry has been speaking about leadership hiring. You're your M2s, manager of one team, and or manager of one team M1, M2, multiple teams, directors, an organization. But there's quite a bunch of stuff that happens above that, and that's sort of where senior director and up. That's where your executive hiring space is. And there's also an IC equivalent, people who do not manage, but they're very senior. And I will also speak about that a little bit. That's some of the work that I've done at Facebook also. So who am I? I live in Spain now, where I have a video which hopefully works. It doesn't, I'm afraid. I had this whole, I moved the drone up in the sky, but this is the view from my house if you move up. I sold an e-commerce startup a long time ago, before Facebook. Me and my childhood friends made it. We happened to be lucky enough that we managed to sell it, and that company went public after as part of Lightspeed. Then I thought, let's start my own company, because I'm tired of all the stuff and real hard working we had to do for a few years, so let me just think about some stuff. But then Facebook called about 6 months later, and I learned that something like chief architect hiring existed. I had no idea, but this is if you're well versed to your leveling system on levels.fyi, it's E7 and above, E7, E8, E9. So I was the first person to set that up. So there was nothing, there was a team, a small team in Menlo Park in California. And then there was me in London. So I had only the site leader in London. I had a few people in the US, 2 VPs, a CTO, and a person named Mark Zuckerberg, basically. So after I did that, I moved back to the Netherlands for a while, where I supported Uber and the Amsterdam office in their leadership efforts, which was great. But then Quantum Black came. That is the acquired machine learning arm to McKinsey. Former people at Facebook asked me to come in, and I led a team of sourcers, and I sort of had a dotted line into some of the recruiting efforts there. And you know, if we zoom in, if we go forward a little bit, I'm currently still wrapping up right at the end of my engagement with Miro. For the past 3 years, I've been responsible for their executive engineering hiring. So I basically work directly with CTO and other business leaders on certain projects and the future of where these companies are going. Miro, for instance, is the fastest growing collaboration space company till date. So sometimes it means that you're exposed to problems that the industry hasn't seen before. So when you translate that into recruiting, it sometimes means that there is no blueprint to go off. So that can be very interesting when you have to work your way around hiring people. And I work my own recruiting consulting firm since 2016. That's called Maven, the black M in the bottom, in the top left. Let's see if we can get the next slide in. There we go. So what are we going to talk about? Stakeholder management and understanding what these people are interested in. Also, how do you engage them? Because hiring at this level is really done as a team. And I think that's maybe a difference to some less senior roles that you hire for, where you get a description on what needs to be hired at what date, and I'll leave it up to you to figure out how am I going to get there. At this level, you're going to have to really work very closely together to these leaders and actually do a lot of homework for them, but also come with very critical questions and ask them to do specific things and show up at specific times. So you have to really work on building that relationship with your specific leader in order to do fruitful work, I'd say. We're going to talk about the engagement of senior candidates as well, because that's the other side of the equation, of course. And then how do you go to market? How do you actually go and speak to a distinguished engineer from one of the biggest engineering companies in the world? That could be an example. I speak a lot about engineering because my focus throughout my career has been mostly software engineering, data science, data engineering, or machine learning. I, for instance, also hired the main machine learning architect in the European space for Facebook. So that kind of gives you an idea. There's a lot of these engineers out there, but then there's some that's just a little bit more senior. That's sort of also part of this space. So maybe it helps if I talk a little bit about where it sits. I'm sure many people recognize this UI because it's levels.fyi, and I'm sure everybody uses it. Figure out where are my main competitors and how senior is a certain person that I'm speaking to. For your context, exec hiring starts sort of at the principal level at Amazon, T6 is at Apple, E7 is at Facebook, or partner engineers at Microsoft. No 66 and 67, and senior staff engineers at Google and up. That's on the IC track, so that's people that do not manage teams. It's also part of executive hiring. And then on the people leadership side, director, senior director of engineering, VPs, head of architecture, so a person that has the formal leadership qualities to lead a team of architects in a CTO office, for instance, to alleviate a CTO so that that person can focus more on deep technical bets for the future. What does the next 3 to 5 years look like for a software company? And then sometimes the question directly, SVP or CTO hiring. That's sort of the scope. Hope we get that. Now, what is important to know, I think, about when you're hiring for people at this level is you have to think about the maturity phase of a company. And we all know people who start a company at one point. It's me and a few friends. You work real hard, maybe with little budget. You have no real idea yet on where your product might show the perfect product fit, but you have a great idea and you're going to go for it. That's probably not where I'm going to be involved yet. I have done it in the past, but that's not executive hiring. So from a funding perspective, you'll see that founders and angels, pre-seed basically is the world what we're talking about. Now, executive hiring comes into place a little bit later. So sort of stage 3, when companies see their initial success, so they have met certain sales thresholds that allowed them to be far more successful. They have reached a certain velocity, a certain seniority, maturity as a company, and that's when they start to open up to the idea of, hey, we have a bunch of engineers right now, or you can replace this with anything. These are parts of organization that need help to grow. You can't just sustain a company on a bunch of individuals growing an organization. You need leaders to help them guide, unblock, create a safe space for them to fail, where maybe previously in startups you have to always hit your mark. When companies become a bit larger, you want to make sure that there's a culture for where a lot of other people can do great work. And that's also a lot of the elements that engineering or executive hiring would look at in the engineering space for me. It's a shame that this sort of overrides a little bit, but it says a product or a service that had reached a defining milestone, such as reached a vertical mass or broke sales threshold. So you sort of finally got to the point where you started to make some real money, maybe, where now it makes sense to start thinking about, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to spend the money that we have made as a company, the venture capital money that we are going to attract from the market? Where does the new Series C, D, E funding rounds come from? We all live in a world where interest isn't free anymore. Just look at the world today, look at technology. The industry for us has unfortunately changed a lot. You see a lot of people who have unfortunately also lost their jobs in the last 12 to 24 months. The world is a different place. So also for an investor, the big venture capital companies out there, they're not going to put their money down to a company as easily anymore as they did before. So where previously maybe a very senior leader, a CTO or a VP of engineering could have reaped the benefits of almost free money, now that reality doesn't exist anymore. So there's a lot of thought that goes behind it on what type of a leader can guide this process, and that also means that you need to make very critical decisions in growing a company forward. That partially has to do with how early are you in a certain industry. So first mover advantage when you're in the ride-hailing space for a company like Uber is great, but what if there are now 5 competitors in that same space? How do you deal with that? And really, you can lose this battle in 12 to 24 months, even if you are doing really well up to that point, even if you make a significant amount of, for instance, annual recurring revenue. Many of these companies that I serve and that very senior leaders want to be part of, they are usually SaaS platforms or platforms that have an scalability element, meaning you can have a lot of users paying for a service, hence you can grow a company by a lot and create market share on the back of that. Not to say that there aren't other interesting industries or companies, but for these very senior leaders, sometimes you see that that's what they're interested in. So what kind of hires, what kind of people could you be looking into for stage 3 and onwards? builders, for sure. There's a big element of me always looking at, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. People have been around the block a lot of times, so maybe they're very close to the point of in their career that they can ease off a little bit. They have made enough money in their career. It's a completely different part of your whole career. Maybe some of these people are very close to actually, maybe they'll make 2 or 3 more career choices and then they'll stop working. So it's also really tricky on getting them to commit to working for you because they are very well aware that it might only be 2 or 3, or in some cases 1 career choice that they'll still make before they stop and do other stuff in life. So what's important? You have to be able to rapidly scale an organization. Many companies that hire me are hiring me because they are growing fast and they need to make sure that these leaders are in play. Because if you hire a leader before they become effective in an organization, you need to count at least 6 to 12 months for it to really dial in and for an organization to see the benefits of such a new additional leader. Usually that's the point where a lot of structure is being put into place again. So the startup world is maybe less structured in a way. All of a sudden you have all these people, all these responsibilities. So you need to have people who can really put a lot of structure in place without taking the fun out of it, without taking the fun of being an engineer in a company. But yeah, there's a big element there. And I touched on it earlier. What sometimes goes wrong in the industry is you have engineering leaders who are able to build a great product, but they do so in a way where it's not so fun for engineers to work in a company doing it. And I saw one of the earlier presenters talk about one of the main reasons for leaving a job from the previous survey was a unsafe working environment or something alike. I'm paraphrasing here. This is one of the main markers that I'll look into early on when I'm screening for people is, do you have the right set of morale? Do you follow certain values that a company can enjoy? And that also the next few hundred of engineers that will join, in my case, would also enjoy working for. It's not easy to always get that out of interviewing, but we spend a lot of time on it. Adjacent to that, you need to make sure that you don't do it on your own. You don't hire a leader to stand on a stage and go, now I'm taking care of everything. You empower the individuals who work in your team. So if you are working in a job like this because you like the title and you like the responsibilities, but you don't understand how to empower a group of people underneath you or a whole organization, it's probably not going to be a great idea. And I hinted on it earlier. Company values. Earlier companies in their earlier stages aren't necessarily super dialed into their company values. Sometimes you see it. Sometimes people don't know exactly who they want to be as an employer. They're figuring it out. That's okay. But when you hit this type of maturity phases, then you are usually of such a big size that Facebook's example, sometimes I had to work with people in the US. I had no idea about their cultural background, about the office that they worked in. We have to do work together. There is nothing left for us to connect on, so maybe sometimes a company value is the only thing that connects you. So understanding values really well and being able to explain that well in an organization helps as you scale out further. So that's pretty important. Now I have a video that I wanted to show, but I'm not sure if it's going to work. Might not, right?
More and more often, it becomes less and less true that you are a good employee. Yeah. And more true that you are a good manager. If you lie too much, at some point your employees don't know what to believe, and at that point you have to move into sales.
I know that everybody in the room, of course, laughs because that's not the point. But this is about trust. And I think the other very important element is, do people trust a leader to work for them, to take bets on their own career? Because a leader sets out the highlights and a few hundred individuals underneath it commit a lot of their time in order to make that happen. So finding the right way to have people work for you and trust you and have that relationship be vice versa is a very important aspect as well. Now, when working with a hiring manager at a senior level on filling a very senior role, you have to manage expectations. And if you've worked on requisitions before, which I'm sure the whole room here has, As you work your career, sometimes earlier in your career you get a role and a client or a manager has a request for you where you need to fill in a position and they'll tell you what they want. And there is very little ability for you to maneuver your way around it or to open the conversation up. They have a very clear idea and that's how it should be. At this level, it's much more of a close collaboration between me and the hiring manager. So there's a great Dutch saying, and it says, "U vraagt, wij draaien." That does not apply here, which should be, "You ask, we turn." I'm not sure if that translates well, but I hope you get the point. So none of this, please. It's a very close collaboration, I said that already, and what is very important in this stuff is doing your homework, because you are very visible in the organization, visible internally. I'll get to the other side in a moment, but CTOs, CEOs, investors, boards, they will know likely about your work, and sometimes out of the blue they will come with specific questions. They will come with let's say certain market research that you have to do. You have to really be on your point and you have to really do your homework starting out on a role. And so the more you ask, the better it will be likely, because there is very little room for you to do that later on as the machine is starting to move. So move slow to move fast a little bit. And asking hard questions sounds super logical, but sometimes it isn't in hiring. A lot of what these people want to go and build and create depends on a puzzle that hasn't been solved in industry yet. So you have nothing to go off. You're the first mover into an industry. My current client is one of the, historically the fastest growing company in the collaboration space. So there's no real competitors, your Slacks, your Skypes, that have grown as fast as you have. So now there is a CTO or another person who comes in with a very senior hiring request, super hard to fill. But yeah, there's no real example of somebody who's done it before. So if you don't ask the hard questions on whether this is feasible, how have they thought about it themselves yet, what are you going to put to market? So you're going to have to use a lot of their input to either, just like for all of us, to sell an opportunity to the market. And don't be too nice to senior leaders. I see a lot of people who just join in executive hiring and always with a smile, most obviously, but it doesn't work to always just take that order and run with it and they'll go, oh, nice, I can work with the CTO now. The CTO isn't paying you to do that. They want you to check and balance them just as much. So working on that relationship early on definitely works your benefit as you work these roles. We're also going to talk a little bit later on the importance of pitching and cultivation. Cultivation is as much as sell calls before people decide to go and interview for a company. So you've reached out to them, they're interested, but they are not quite sure if they should commit themselves to interviewing. And pitching is what I'm going to spend a little bit more time on in a moment, on how you actually do that for when reaching out to very senior people. Now, what do these stakeholders have in common? Both your hiring manager and your candidates will be responsible for solving very complex things and managing very, very big initiatives. So that means that they are sort of doing the same type of job, either very close to the same level and scope. So it's not like it's super high, there's not a big hierarchy in a way. You can hire somebody that is almost equal in seniority, yet doing just slightly a different of a role. That's sort of the scope of it. All of the people that you work with suffer from a lack of time. I mean, again, that might sound very logical until you have to go and hire a bunch of people for them, then you realize how busy these people are. So doing your homework, as I said earlier, is going to be very important because they don't have time for you to spend another week on something, or we'll get back to that later. You have to kind of hit your marks. And all of your parties involved will be gauging who can they trust. So your hiring partner on the ownership side, can I trust this person to completely own this complex hiring request and deal with everything that's needed? That also means sometimes going into their organization, interviewing people on a critical note on how this work should even be done. Interview loop construction, how do you actually hire for a very senior person? What interviews are you going to think about? It doesn't mean that these business partners know all the answers yet. They have you as your expert. So they're going to look at a lot of, how do we gauge this signal? Do we have somebody in the company who can do it? How do we solve for that when we interview? There's a lot of responsibility for instance, me or you, in case if you would do this. And then the candidate side would be looking at career advice. So a lot of people who reach out to me are VPs of engineering, CTOs who have had a couple of successful exits before, who are pretty senior in their career. whether I send them a message right now because I have a role to fill or not, they'll reach out to me and they'll go, hey, you have a bit of experience in the industry, I'm at this point in my career, where do I even go from here? Or I have only 2 choices more to make, I'm 60 now, what do I do? So you're going to be much more of a, on the HR side, on the career development side in this type of role sometimes, as you are actively hiring. And I'll get moving slow to move fast in a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about senior folks and how you should engage them. I'm not going to talk a lot about this. If you want to look at my data world, I've spoken about various of these things in the past. Adrian even hinted towards it in my introduction. I'm happily sending you the links after if you want. But what I want to say here is focus on patterns in the data. Don't look at an individual and go, this is what great looks like. Sometimes I take it away from an individual and I get my hiring request and I will look at a very large landscape of candidates. Thousands, tens of thousands. And if you know your way around scraping it and finding patterns in that data that supports you have been successful in the past, we all know that in senior hiring, if you've been around in a role for 1.5 years or longer, that probably means that you're starting to see some success. I already said earlier to you, it takes 6 to 12 months for somebody to be successful in the first place, get some impact. So if they leave jobs early, then probably that's not a good indicator for you, especially when you start to look at 20,000 of them at the same time. Also what another speaker was hinting towards earlier, low-hanging fruit also kind of exists in this world. You just have to make sure that you work your data well. But what you need to look for is patterns of have somebody seen something to success at a very senior level before, at a company that grew a lot. So that's what I do first, and then I'll get to see what individual actually sits underneath it. So, yes, I will. The next, this starts, and it's fun, and everybody does it. Doesn't matter for what type of role you're working on. But it does mean that you have to do a lot of selling, and I'll start to talk a little bit about what that entails. What you need to know is there's a lot of timing involved with hiring these people. It's not a, oh, I have a role, I can reach out now, no, we'll be fine. It doesn't matter when, it does matter when. I have the role now, it needs to be filled now. That's not how it works in very senior hiring. I need to know that because sometimes I'm supporting client A and I know that the person they really want won't be available for the next 2 years. So I have to bridge a gap sometimes where a company gets more and more mature, gets more and more users, but I need to keep these relationships going for the potential of them also realizing a year later that, hey, Yves was actually maybe right, maybe it is a good time to speak. Where maybe when you work less senior roles, it's okay if an engineer or somebody else doesn't want to join right now, you move on to the next. This world, there's not a lot of people out there. Sure, there's a few thousand still, but the ones you need for your maturity phase in your company could be as little as 100 to 200. So keeping this relationship going for the long term is very important. So when are these folks considering job switches? The cadence sort of could be 6 to 12 months. Usually they're already booked up for the next year because they join a company with the idea of we're going to take this company to IPO, to Series D and E funding, to a dominant market share. It's never short-term goals, so when these people buy in on a job, they also won't leave overnight. They really want to see things through. Again, when you reach out and when you build your relationships, you need to think about these things. They're very passive, they rarely ever apply. I mean, I think that that's probably a logical thing, but I will mention it. Patience is literally everything. If you don't know how to move slowly in order to move very fast, you will lose out because you're going to just sound too hungry coming into it. And these senior leaders will actually maybe even block you out of their short list of people to speak to. And that's a problem because then you don't have any opportunity ever again. And if you're doing this, like I am, very committed to the senior hiring space, that is a very bad idea for me personally as well. So patience is key. Now we're going to speak a bit about the preparations on when you reach out to very senior folks. First thing would be, again, I said this earlier, do your homework. And I'll speak a bit in a moment about what that looks like. But the more business context that you can get and share up front, the better. So I usually interview a lot of people in the business prior to actually going to market, where I build a pitch document or a presentation about all the difficult factors about a certain role and why we need them. That's stuff you don't read on careers pages. That's stuff that companies sometimes are very reluctant to share. You need to work your stakeholder management relationship with whoever you work with to make sure you ride the line. And what can we share? What's the company still comfortable with? Because otherwise, how are these leaders supposed to know if it's interesting enough to join, right? Mind you, all the people that I work with don't necessarily need a job. They do it because they're really interested in having an impact in the industry, or they're just like insanely passionate about technology. It's not because they need work specifically. So, examples could be, talk about bringing the pain. Don't play the good weather show. Talk about where it really hurts. Be honest and humble enough to say, our world isn't perfect. A lot of companies go to market and go, it's great, and we're growing fast, and we're making all this money, and we're such a great culture. Table tennis tables involved in everything. These people will not believe you, and also they've seen over the years that that's maybe not the show they want to be a part of in the first place. A lot of them are very interested in fixing something or working to a better tomorrow, or they want to use that experience for good. So good weather show, I wouldn't do it. And talk about the big bets, not the stuff that is happening tomorrow. Talk about the stuff that will happen 12 to 24 months from now. Those are the things that they're interested about. Those are the big goals that they need to work on and commit themselves on. And that means that sometimes an organization of hundreds of engineers, in my case, need to work towards that goal as well. That's not done overnight. So explain what that looks like. Or are you going to move away from one product now? Are you going to be a suite of products tomorrow? Again, these are things that are exciting. Talk about them. So it's not necessarily cross-department stuff, your scale of impact. It's more or less on the line of, at least it touches on the whole company and sometimes even the whole industry. There's people that sometimes you hire, that I hired at Facebook, that definitely changed the world, and basically all engineers that are working in a certain language or with React, to name something as a framework, came out of Facebook London, by the way. So yeah, what are these leaders looking for? So scalability, I said it earlier, there's a lot of stuff that has to do with scalability. These people really want to make sure that they don't have to manage the shop. That's not interesting to them. There needs to be an element of insecurity or an element of, not sure if this is quite going to work, but we need to go from here to there as fast as we can. Again, if you're not first in a market and you're coming as number 2, this is going to be even more important than if you're number 1 in a market. It means if I don't move fast enough, I will lose. That's what they're interested in. So what impact can I create in a full market? Can I satisfy internally, if you're a booking, the clients, all the clients are booking, or if you are a company like Miro, the amount of end users that your product holds, or if you're a consultancy firm, the clients that you support, and are they happy with the engagements that you run for them? But in numbers, not necessarily 1, 2, 3, but yeah, in the millions usually. Again, senior career based on having impact, not short-term cash goals either. Many of these people are, they've gained some success earlier on in their career as well. They don't do it for the money necessarily. So you get a goal is a much better one than basically the conversation about money. This is one that I wanted to share as well. True leaders don't merely occupy a seat in the organization, they drive it forward and propel a company to new heights. That's where you want to be. That's the type of conversation you want to have. If you feel that people are, let's say, comfortable enough in an industry and they don't need to run that hard anymore, and they show that to you, that's probably not going to be the one that you want to hire, because it will be tough for the next few years. It will be very demanding. It will have a huge strain sometimes on your work-life balance. These are things that you commit to quite a bunch when you sometimes talk about these big roles. So does somebody really want it? That's going to be important. And now for the Uber people in the room, I'm looking at one of them there, a value of the company. I'm not sure if it still exists, but it used to be there definitely in the past. Be an owner, not a renter. And I'm sure that might make sense to you as well, but that's what you want. People who take ownership of their work, the company, see it as part of them. And to be honest, all these people that we hire at this level usually get a significant equity package involved as well, so they are also part owner of that company. So behave as such. Don't leave the company in a worse place than how you came into it. And a lot of people join roles at this level of seniority because, again, I said it, they're not going to make many career decisions anymore. They want to sometimes, and this is more applicable to the IC world than the leadership world, if you hire a chief architect for Facebook, they have done many impactful things in the past, but they want to look back on their career and go, what was the legacy that I left? Can I talk about something when I'm old and go, This is what I created. The industry is now functioning differently. I helped unblock XYZ. That's the type of questions that they are asking themselves. And not, should I be in an office 3 days a week or no? It's a very different line of questioning that sometimes at this level happens. So how do you sell it? Life's a pitch. These things are more important. So I put this guy in because this is a product demo. That's how I act when I talk to candidates. I have pitch decks, I have many sources of information, and my first 15 minutes, even if I have a person engaged in the first place to hop on a call with me, is a lot about what's the position in the market. Can we talk something about customer lifetime value? Can we talk about the cost of a customer acquisition cost? Can we talk about the annual recurring revenue that the business is generating? Can we talk about so many other factors? That is the type of things that they're interested in, because basically these people are investors themselves. If you talk to people at this level, usually they have many investments out, and sometimes they even will join in an active role to pay for all of the investments that they have in market. So they will very much look at your business as an investment opportunity. And then from that, you can actually, talk about the pitch decks behind it that you can share over email and go read this first and then decide if you want to hop on a call with me. But the more context, the better. Do the homework for them. They're very busy. They don't give you a second shot sometimes. Do as much of the homework for them. Now, on pitching, I said it already. Most people at this level are investors. So talk to them as if they were going to invest. They will still hopefully work for you, but that should be the angle for talking to these people. Talk about opportunities in the market versus the threats. We all know that you're usually not alone in a certain industry, so discuss it. Don't talk about the good weather show and how good it is going in your specific company. What's the industry doing? What market share can we create? What's the impact that this person can have? That's sort of the line of conversation. And then, again, venture capital money isn't free anymore. So also when these candidates speak to me, they are super critical. They will ask me, what are you doing with your VC funds? How sustainable is your business? Can you survive on your own? Are your numbers in the black? Or are you running out of money tomorrow? They're super critical. So if I don't have strong answers there, usually I lose. I was lucky enough that I can draw a little bit of experience out of my own previous experience as well, because Lightspeed is the company, there's DAX. We sold our e-commerce Dutch startup to Lightspeed, and that ended up going public in Canada and in the US. That helps. If you have seen a company, and you could be an employee in a company as well, and seen the post-acquisition life, from a startup to being part of a bigger organization. Draw experiences from that and try to relay it to them, because you get a lot of conversation going on the back of these type of discussions. And it's going to really greatly appreciate your career. So if you want to go into executive hiring and you think that joining a scale-up before who might do an IPO at some point is a good idea to get there, sometimes it is, because you will learn a lot about its maturity phases leading on to acquisition and post-acquisition life and being a public company. So prepare to get interviewed when you speak to these people, I'll tell you that much. It's never a smooth ride when you get them in a call, and you realize that sometimes there's only one of them in the world, so you kind of have to hit your mark. So you get one shot, really, trust me. They're critical. They're going to ask you tons of questions. You are happy to roll out your pitch. You have a nice evening call with somebody who finally made time because they're also busy, and here you are, and you're thinking like, oh, it's 11 p.m. I need to let me do this pitch, and then they'll go and they come in with 15 hard questions. That's also very much part of this world, but it's also very fun. What I've learned about the enjoyment of this work is you have to be on the ball the whole time. If you mess up, you feel it immediately. And once I have pitched a great potential candidate to my CTO, and I lose that candidate, there's not another 50 out there. So I'm going to have a problem. So doing your homework there, again, preparation is critical. They're going to be passive throughout. So when they commit to interviews, they're going to be as passive almost as when they came in. Usually that's not the case, and many hiring managers will tell you, well, they need to commit to interviewing now. At this level is keep chatting, keep it rolling. But they can be a great brand ambassador for you, even if they don't get hired. I have a lot of people who didn't get hired but had a great experience and don't want to help you with great referrals, with their network, with their investors. It doesn't matter. They are a huge amplifier for your work if you manage your candidate experience well. But this. Now I wanted to dedicate one slide to culture. because I could talk about it for a long time, but I thought this was a nice quote. Culture is how employees' hearts and stomachs feel about Monday morning on Sunday night. And I feel when you hire leaders, it's going to be very important that you think about what kind of a company are we creating when we do it. Because if you hire the wrong one, it could really come back to you in a bad way. You could have tons of leaders, ICs leave underneath. You have half a company that's leaving. We've seen it happen in the industry in the past. So thinking about the right type of leader that understands your cultural values and that doesn't want to take your company to the next level, not only from a technical perspective, but very much for what is the company that I'm leaving in a few years from here, and what type of working environment am I going to create for thousands of people. Very important. Now, let's say you get them to interview. They finally commit, because they'll stay passive throughout. I said that earlier. You do want to prepare them a little bit. So when it's about, and this is drawn largely from the IC world, so let's say very senior architects or very senior ICs, or in some cases also senior directors, VPs of engineering, they're going to have to figure out a world that scales. So distributed system design and software engineering, we have a lot of users. They need to become even more users. It's going to be a distributed system regardless. So you being the coach to that candidate and you preparing them for what's happening is going to be very important. Don't assume that because somebody is senior, they'll know how to ace every interview. Every company is different. Sometimes they're a little rusty because they've led organizations for a long time and they haven't interviewed anymore. Take them by the hand. So the shoe is now on the other end of the foot. Guide your candidate. They are now the interviewee. A few more things. Maybe there's light at the end of the interview tunnel, hopefully, when you have a few good candidates. In my world, it's usually the 5-3-1 rule. So I'll reach out less than 100 folks, usually, yeah. And then I get a bunch of screen calls out of it. I don't know the exact number to that. And then we get 5 people who will interview for a role as part of the first batch. You usually hope to close out a role in the first batch. 3 of them will actually make it to the end of the interview loop successfully, and 1 of them hopefully accepts your offer. So it's a different world than maybe hundreds of reach outs. It's a different world. But again, it's all about how well you manage your data. If you don't know the big picture around how does the market globally move, you might then still spin your wheels and reach out to the wrong people and the role doesn't get filled. And in executive hiring, the end result of that can have a high monetary value loss to this, if that makes any sense. Don't hire a CTO for a certain company. The VC will ask, why don't you have a CTO? Maybe we'll pull our funding away. Where's that company going? So that's sort of the hit your markers. So then a candidate hits candidate review with a hiring manager. I don't know, depends on the company. But you need to go and clarify and contextualize, because the interview feedback scorecards for these type of roles are long. And sometimes there's an amazing amount of interviews, post-interview selling that happens still after the interviews when a business wants to offer a candidate, but the candidate is like, I don't know yet. I want to speak to your CFO, your CTO, a whole list of people. There's going to be a lot of feedback forms, and when it's time to do a candidate review session, you're going to need to read everything and hit the marks. Because if you don't study these scorecards very heavily, you can lose a candidate like this, and you've worked on it for a year, and that's painful. It probably applies for everyone, applies a lot in this context as well. So this hurts. I'm sure everybody has been there. I've been there. It's not great. You want to minimize it. And yeah, at this level, there's one thing. If there's a bar scraping, somebody may be senior enough, maybe it will work out, maybe they can learn on the job, doesn't apply here. It's either yes or no. Last few things. Again, if you don't protect your candidate throughout this process, no one will. You're the closest, let's say, protectee that they have, even though they're not in the room. So maybe see it as such. A few things to keep in mind. The more senior the candidate, the more touch points. Not only in time, this could sometimes take 6 to 9 months to hire somebody, sometimes even longer. You'll speak on various different times of the day, times of the year. You have to be a little bit flexible and really stay on the candidate relationship. And it can be tiring at times when you have 100 of them and a very long time to do it for. But candidates can be interviewers as well. So, when they are there, help them catch their own blind spots. I said it earlier as well. Remember, move slow to move fast. Sometimes do your homework first, prepare very well, and then attack that market, not the other way around. And hires can cultivate after years. This can take a very long time. Don't expect these things to, we need a CTO now. It would be great if in 90 days they are operational and successful. If you get a request like that from a client, ask hard questions. And that's what I said earlier as well. I'm working with very senior stakeholders. And everyone knows everyone. So if you mess up, the market will know. And if you do a good job, that works to your benefit as well. So when they accept an offer, when the job is done, maybe not. It's very heavy reliant on post-selling from our business. So let's say we want to offer a candidate, we could have to then interview with them afterwards. So that's a very tiring exercise at times. You have to prepare your business to hit all of the markers, all of the questions. You have to take the lead role in that. It's done together. And closing rolls out isn't any different. So once there's an offer, it's not on the recruiter to just do this. Use your business to do a lot of the selling for you. That's anything as of leadership hiring as above and above. That's what my good advice would be. So yeah, sell a little bit is my big suggestion there. I think I covered a lot. I went a little bit over time, but if there's any questions, then I want to hear them. There was a great picture here in the back, but it's gone. Anyhow. That's it.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for the presentation. Yes. I was wondering, you said you had the 5-3-1 rule, so 3 offers go out and hopefully 1 candidate accepts, or let's say 1 does accept. I was wondering, because I see that you're a lot of the data. In general, what is those 2 candidates that don't go through overall? What's the reason on this level overall that candidates drop out at the very last minute?
You mean we decide that they have to drop out, or they decide they don't want to have any part anymore?
They decide.
They decide. Ooh, it could be a big factor. It could be the same list to a certain degree as any other, well, far less senior person. We can all imagine some of the reasons, but I think what I talked about in the presentation was a lot about hitting your markers as a company on. Are you spending your venture capitalist money in the right way? What are you going to do with the revenue that you have? What business units are you thinking about building? What is the product organization doing? So do I believe in the CPO? Is there the right direction? Because the engineering and product split is the what versus how, right? So if the what is not the right thing for them, they don't believe that if they spend the next 5 years doing the how, that is going to result in the best possible deal for them. Again, part of this is also lots of equity, right? So these people join for the long term because they think it's a great idea to have a lot of business impact in an industry. So that's often what you see are the reasons for not joining. It's far less at that point, I don't like the culture. And it's sometimes the money aspect as well, but more often than not, that doesn't really seem to be the problem. And when we say 5-3-1 and you talk about offers, you don't issue 3 at one time. You wouldn't do that, right? So it's you start with your best one, you hope that works, and then you. So you could strike out multiple times, yes, but let's make sure you can strike out. You know?
But there's not. It's a combination of things. There's not you as a recruiter over all the years you see that this is the main reason why the candidate strikes out at the last minute. Because I don't know on this level. I know on the levels that I.
So from a business side, what I've seen over the years is the company or CEO feels uncomfortable with the way how they can grow a business, or that they're not hungry enough anymore. I see a lot of that as well. And that's a bit of a fuzzy type of terminology, right? But there's a lot of conversation that goes before people reach such a conclusion. But that's, from the business perspective, that's the biggest reason. Do you still want to go and do this and commit a lot of your time? It's very intense usually. It's never watching the shop, right? So it will always be lots of highs, lots of lows, and do you really want that? And sometimes you'll have a great candidate, we'll love him, but we'll still say no because of this.
Thanks.
It's more in the back.
Thank you very much. When it comes to senior hiring or executive, when you look at, for example, senior director and above, sometimes the reaching out part, a big portion of them, they're not actually online. They never really check out LinkedIn or whatever. So what are other either platforms or ways that you can find those people and engage with them?
Good question. You're right. A lot of these people don't care about their LinkedIn. We saw it earlier with an example from somebody saying, hey, there's an SRE engineer in booking with a big description, and there's one that says nothing. A lot of these leaders say nothing, or they have an outdated LinkedIn because it's not that important. So finding places where they engage, looking at venture capitalist companies where they are attached to, looking at the AWS video that will come out that shows either themselves on it or a chief architect or a distinguished engineer, depending on the role that you're trying to fill. Certain conferences or dinners that some people might attend, a lot of them are closed behind doors. A lot of my work at Facebook was all very much behind doors. You work a lot underwater in this world, so a lot of stuff is not visible.
Yeah.
When I work in my client's office and there's a lot of other recruiters, I'm sure half of them won't really know why that guy is walking around. But you do a lot of stuff that isn't visible. Same applies for them. So trying to connect and getting offline to a certain degree is a great effort from mine. And finding emails definitely also works. Don't start calling people out of the blue. A, you will never get them on the line. B, they'll be heavily annoyed when you do so.
Yeah. Awesome, thanks.
No. Okay. In the back, there's two ladies actually. I'll answer yours later. Come find me.
We are the agency, and before a candidate meets client, we have a meeting, we call it pitching meeting. So we say what they did well and great with us and what they should improve maybe with a client interview. And with the executive level candidate, we have a little bit, we have been a lot of interview, we know what to do. Yeah. So how to give this feedback properly.
I don't quite understand it yet, so what feedback to whom?
So to the candidate who should meet our client who is hiring. So we give the feedback what they did great during the interview with us and a little bit what should they improve.
You want to know how to break the news?
Yes.
Break it, the shit sandwich. Have you heard about it? It works. Don't beat around the bush. These people are senior, and what they want is they want information from you now, concrete. Do the homework for them. So they'll actually appreciate if you come in, again, with a smile, but break it down to them so they understand. Because a lot of these people, the very good ones, they really want to learn still. So they'll ask you for that feedback. The good ones usually do. And even when they don't make it, when they get rejected, they'll hop on feedback calls, spend the time, and sometimes they be a lot of time, do it. Because 5 years later, that's still somebody you want to go and hire. Make them better throughout their career. You're almost an HR advisor for the whole community out there, not just a client you support, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, just one question very quickly. You mentioned that the follow-up time is usually very, very long when you're reaching out to these senior folks. So what would that be on an average? I mean, I say, for example, you found this really, really good candidate, fitting for a CTO. The first email was not responded. When is it that you would send a second email to them?
Quick. You want to get the news quick, so break it.
No. I mean, the first time you're reaching out to them, when you're sourcing.
Yeah, but still, quick. So if they don't reply to my first email, at the end of the week they'll get the second, because in the weekend they're either coming back from traveling, offsites, doing stuff, they'll be in a plane, they'll land, they'll look at it. So try and do it as fast as possible, and from a GDPR perspective, make sure that you send out everything under 30 days, and then hash it, anonymize the data, because if people don't reply, that means they don't want to have anything to do with me, which means I can technically remove that data, because I shouldn't have it in the first place.
Okay, thank you.
Give it up for Yves one more time. Thank you so much, Yves.
Thank you for having me.
If you have any other questions, reach out to Yves. He will be around.